What's good, everyone? In this video, we're going to write some really clever code to enable GPT to help our chatbot control our smart home. Now, if you haven't seen any of my other videos in this series, I suggest you check them out as it'll help you get up to speed with what we're doing here. But as usual, I'll give a recap. We're creating a custom AI chatbot that is powered by GPT-3 capable of controlling a smart home. This process has four main phases, each with their own set of challenges. Phase 1 was creating a Telegram bot and integrating it into Home Assistant. The Telegram bot acts as a base for our AI chatbot and takes the place of Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, and even Home Assistant's Assist. Phase 2 was adding OpenAI's API into our automation, which enabled us to use GPT to get answers. We were even able to send GPT our entities, as well as their status, and ask questions about our smart home. Now we're at Phase 3. In this video, I'll teach you how to get your chatbot to manipulate states of common devices such as lights and switches. Phase 4, that one I'll explain at the end. Phase 4 is the most complicated of all the phases, and as a result, this one is going to be optional. However, if you do decide to do Phase 4, it will give your chatbot some terrifying capabilities. But later on that at the end. Currently, all we can do is ask our chatbot questions, but if we give it a command, it's not really going to do anything. If you've installed OpenAI's integration in the device and settings page, you'll see that they tell the bot not to indulge us if we give it a command, and this is part of the reason why. So the first thing that we're going to have to do in this journey of Phase 3 is enable Home Assistant to differentiate between whether or not we are asking it a question or making a statement. Originally, I solved this problem by using a natural language processor, or an NLP for short, called Compromise. However, during my testing, I discovered that though it was really good at telling me if a sentence was a question or not, there were a few circumstances where it wasn't able to do so unless I gave it proper punctuations. As a matter of fact, it worked 100% of the time given correct punctuations. And you might be thinking, what's wrong with that? This problem seems pretty easy. Just make sure you write grammatically correct. Put punctuations. I personally think that the implications of this is kind of big. First, if the chatbot can only differentiate questions with a question mark, then does that mean I always have to type grammatically correct? And then what happens if I were to add speech to text later on? Do we expect the voice control to appropriately add punctuations where they need to be? So really, what's the alternative? I could make the code for the chatbot very robust and add in a whole bunch of conditional statements or switches and check for permutations of speech that could be interpreted as questions, but I think that would make the code very long, very unmaintainable, and kind of error prone, and it sounds like a lot of over-engineering for something that's supposed to be simple. But I think we should see if GPT can figure this out. Here in GPT, I have this statement up here. If the following sentence is a question, return true, otherwise return false. So let's just try this out. This is without a question mark. It identifies that it is a question, correct? Now this is the one that the previous NLP had an issue with. Let's see how GPT handles this. It knows that it's a question, it appended the question mark at the end, and then it returned it as true. This is correct. So GPT is technically able to it has more wiggle room to determine whether or not a sentence is a question or not. I suspect that even though it did this example well, that there may be examples that can trip it up, but for the most part, I think it has a higher reliability rate than the NLP function that I have here on the other page would essentially give us. So we're going to try this out just to keep things simple. Instead of having two things in our code, we're simply going to give this problem to GPT. Here we have two sides of this equation. The first side here basically grabs information from Telegram and determines if it's a question or a statement. The second side of this equation is basically handling whether or not it's a question or a statement. The top portion of this right here is what we've discussed in video 2. This is how we are answering all the questions. We're using OpenAI and it's sanitizing the response and responding back. This is how we can ask our chatbot absolutely anything, even about our own Home Assistant environment. The only thing that we weren't able to do is the actual doing. We had to give our chatbot the ability to do. And that's what this section right here, or at least this node right here, needs to do. And if you remember back in video 1, we basically allow it to take in dynamic actions and entities, but we have no way of parsing that information from Telegram. So if Telegram gives us a text that says, hey, turn on the kitchen lights, it has no way of knowing what is a kitchen light, what entity is that, like what does that mean, and it has no way of knowing to turn it on. Like it doesn't know what turn on mean. This is what we're going to get to, but first let's just test out to make sure that we can actually determine whether or not this is a question or a statement. These 4 nodes right here are basically what helps us to determine whether or not it's a question or a statement. So here in this template, we're basically grabbing the prompt that came from Telegram and we're adding it to the end of this statement or command. And this command is the same exact command that we have in the example that I showed before. We're basically asking OpenAI, hey, is this sentence a question? If so, return true, otherwise return false. We pass that information along to OpenAI. The only difference is that we are updating this portion right here that says message.template. Before it said message.prompt, but now it says message.template because that's what we saved it in this previous node. See, we saved it into message.template. Next, the response goes to the sanitized node, where we simply sanitize it as we normally did. The only thing extra that we're doing here is we're just making sure that that text is lowercase. Remember, OpenAI is going to be returning true or false, and sometimes that true may be capitalized, sometimes it may be lowercase, we don't know. So we're making sure that any answer it gives us, true or false, is going to be all lowercase. The reason why we're doing this is because in the last node, we are looking at that answer and we need to compare that string to know which branch to take. If GPT sent us true, then we're going to be taking this upper branch, which is number 1. Otherwise, which is false, we're going to be taking branch number 2. Branch number 1 will take us to, again, what we've discussed before in the previous video, and branch number 2 is going to take us to this new stuff that we're going to be implementing today. Let's test this out. We'll first test the previous behavior by asking a question and see if it can answer. Next, we'll test the actual behavior that we want, and we're going to give it a command. We got this information from Telegram, and it noticed that that sentence is a command, so it never responded back. And it showed up here in the debugger. So I think we found our way over our first hurdle. Now that our bot can differentiate between questions and statements, we can start connecting things together, especially this new code along with our older code that we know works. There's technically a bug here, but we're going to come back to that. I'll explain that later. For now, we're going to need to handle the statement side of this branch. Back in the first episode, I showed you all that the call service node is able of taking in dynamic information, such as entities and actions. The hurdle I explained at the time was that Home Assistant need to be able to interpret the sentences for actions and entities. For example, if I told the chatbot, turn off the kitchen lights, we would need it to be able to grab the action turn off and the entity kitchen lights. But this is actually pretty complicated to achieve. Consider the following commands. Turn off the lights in the kitchen. Hey, in the kitchen, turn off all the lights. As humans, we all understand this to be the same exact command, but spoken in different ways. And this would be the extreme difficulty. We can't possibly code for all of these different permutations, or at least not easily. As a matter of fact, this problem is so difficult that within the current systems that are used in the real world, they need to use machine learning and NLP in order to associate intents to various sentences. So for instance, if you've worked with Home Assistant's intents and configs, you've basically worked with this particular paradigm before. For every unique way of saying a command, you would have to add it to the config and map it to some kind of intent. This has been going on for a long time, ever since like chatbots started hitting the scene. This is the way that I've seen them handle this particular problem. It's pretty reliable, it accomplishes the goal, but it kind of comes at the cost of making the code pretty rigid. kind of laborious on the developer side. So for you, you're going to have to do a lot of work of like creating a lot of these mappings, and it's not really user friendly and it's kind of boring. But since I do know how this works behind the scenes where it requires NLP and machine learning, this sounds like this may be a job for GPT. Here's a simplified example. I'll tell GPT that we have a world that contains three entities. Now I'll tell it to answer the following question by returning the entities that best answer the following question. What about actions? Class, you see where I'm taking you, right? GPT can interpret our sentences. Let's take what we've learned and put it into action. Okay, so here's the updated code that will handle finding the entities and the actions from a given sentence. Now, all of this here, though it seems like a lot, isn't that complicated. And it just simply takes a lot of the examples that I showed you earlier and basically strings them together to get something pretty creative and interesting. So the first part of this is the same, right? So even for the get entities and filter for specific entities, both of these are the same, both for answering questions generically and for gathering the entities as well as the actions. Where the differences start is for the prompt to find entities. Inside here, this is where we create the templates that we send to OpenAI to get the answers that we're looking for. Here is almost the same as the previous one, but the thing that we've altered is within this section down here. We're basically telling OpenAI to instead respond with a comma separated list of all the entities that matches what the sentence is asking for. We're basically taking this template and we're saving it into message.template, same as before. We're passing it to OpenAI, just the same as before. Have the message template there. And then, of course, we have the same sanitized response. And what this is going to do is it's going to return, and for the answer, we're going to see the answer basically being a comma separated list of all the entity IDs matching what was discussed in the prompt. So now that we have the entity IDs, we need to go and set it. We're going to save it to this message dot underscore entities because currently our entities object is being used earlier on from this get entities that's behind here. Remember, we're saving the list of entities that we initially got. So all this is doing is this is using JavaScript to basically take that comma separated string and tell it to split it by the commas. And it's going to basically create an array object of all of the entities. So let's say there is three entity IDs, all comma separated. It's basically going to split that into an array of three items, those three items being the entity IDs. All right, so now the next part of this is basically looking for the action. So we have this new prompt, same as the example from before, and we're simply saying here's an overview of all the actions that our smart home has, turn on, turn off, and toggle. And we're basically asking OpenAI to, based off of the sentence that we give it, find the action that best describes what's happening in that prompt. And then we're saving this to template again. Then, of course, we pass it to OpenAI, same as before. And then we have the same sanitized response, same as before, nothing changes. The only thing that changes here now is we have the set actions. So we're going to be getting back basically a single string that's turn underscore on, turn underscore off, or toggle. And then, of course, we're updating the GPT answer to on it because further along in this automation, we're going to respond back to Telegram, and Telegram needs to basically give us a indicator that, hey, it's doing what we asked it to do. And then lastly, now that we have the actions and the entities, we have action and entities, this is basically going to fire off whatever that command is. And that's pretty much it. Currently, the lights in my office are on, so we're going to ask our chatbot to turn them off for us. Done. Our chatbot can now handle questions and commands. But before we, tip our hats and move on, we need to fix two problems. Earlier on, I mentioned that there's a bug lurking in this code. Consider the following question. Can you turn off the kitchen light? Is this a question or is this a command? Hard to say, right? Technically, this is a question, but as humans, we know that this is a passively polite way to ask someone to do something. It's a command phrased as a question, and this will trip up our chatbot. So, to get around this, we simply need to add the following line to GPT's instructions. This is the same concept seen in OpenAI's integration. Here's a demo of this in action. The last issue is that whenever we ask our chatbot to do anything or give it a command, at worst, it's going to take about 3 trips to OpenAI's servers. This increases latency, makes the bot slow, and can get expensive as we pay by the token. So let's see if we can cut this trip down by 1. Okay, so this is the updated version of the same automation. Now, entities, this is the same thing for the filter, all of this is the same. The magic happens here in this template. Now, we are still getting the same entity summaries. However, we combined all of the stuff that we did in the previous one where we kind of separated out getting the entities and the actions. We placed it in one command. So after giving them the list of all of the entities that's within our smart home, we also give OpenAI a list of the actions that can be done. And then we also give it a template. And the template is basically going to hold an action and a list of entities. And we tell this to OpenAI. Respond to the following sentence below with the JSON object only by updating the action value with one of the action list items that best relates to the sentence below, and filling the entities array with only the IDs of the entities that relates to the sentence below. So essentially, for both the actions and the entities, we want OpenAI to find both of those things and fill out each of these properties accordingly that best fits whatever the prompt that we send it. We send the information to OpenAI, that doesn't change. Sanitize response doesn't change. However, this section here changes just a tad bit. We need to essentially grab this information that they send back, and we need to essentially create an actual object that can be used within Home Assistant. So just for the sake of cleanup, sometimes GPT may respond back not with the object, but with like a sentence saying something like JSON response is equal to, and then it'll write out like the stringified version of this JSON object. Just to avoid any of that, we're basically searching for the index of the first open curly brace, which signifies the beginning of that object, and we're just going to sanitize by removing everything that comes before it. This is going to basically parse that stringified JSON object back into an object form where we can actually grab the action and the entities, and we're simply just re-saving it into new properties. So message.action and message._entities. That way the following node, the call service node, can pick this up like it did with the previous implementation of this. So let's run it and see how this goes. So the office lights are off. Let's turn it on. Fantastic. Okay, class. I have a challenge for all of you. I don't know if it's possible, but I suspect it is. But I think we can cut this down by one more and make it just one trip to the server. Can you do it? So instead of me taking a stab at this, I want to see your approach. I want to see if you can create a prompt that can bring this from 2 requests down to 1. Now, here's my criteria. Create a query that enables GPT to answer in 1 request. If given a question, GPT's response should look like this. And if given a command, then GPT's response should look like this. You can use the template that I created as inspiration for your answers. To keep consistency, we can use the 3 entities that you see here, and we can use the 3 actions that you see here. But additionally, and most importantly, your instructions must be super concise. You need to be able to explain yourself to GPT in as few words as possible. Because remember, we got to pay for this, so we need this to be concise. By the end of May, I'll test out your responses and give you an update as to who did the best, as well as update my website with the answer of the person who won. Good luck. Currently, our chatbot can answer questions and handle simple single commands. In phase 4, we will enable the chatbot to run custom complex commands. For example, I have a global volume control that controls the volumes of the text-to-speech across all of my automations. Instead of manually adjusting the volume on the dashboard or in the helpers, I can have the assistant control it. This would mean that I can tell the chatbot change the master volume to 50%, and it should be able to comply. Another example of complex commands would be telling the chatbot to turn on the alarm in the house. And it should be able to tell me if there are any doors or windows open, or just simply do it if everything is okay. And if there is something open, then let me know which thing is open, as well as probably give me the option to bypass it after giving it or telling it a code. I will try my best to make phase 4 as simple as possible, but as you can see, like, the level of finesse is like top shelf, so no promises. Oh, and one more thing. Check the link in the description to get access to all of the nodes and automations that I created in this video, as well as the videos I've done previously. If you found anything that I've showed you today useful or interesting or mildly amusing, please, I would appreciate it if you guys can like the video and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and it lets me know that you're into this and to create more. Okay, I think that's it. Class dismissed.